On today's episode of the ASP, I sit down with voice actor Christopher Wehkamp to discuss his career, sci-fi, Macross, Gundam, mech shows, pretty much everything. Welcome everybody to the Animation Station Podcast, episode 95. My name is Josh, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Mr. Christopher Wehkamp. How you doing, Chris?
Hey Josh, how are you? I'm very happy to be here.
Awesome. Now, real quick, Chris, just give our audience members just a little brief glimpse into who is Chris.
Yes. So, as you said, my name is Christopher Wehkamp. I am a voice actor, voiceover and voice actor artist, I suppose. I do a lot of work with Funimation Studios, and I've done some work with Sentai Filmworks as well. Okratron, and some video game companies as well. But yeah, so I'm a voice actor. That's kind of a main thing. And yeah, I get to do all kinds of cool voices in anime and video games and cool stuff like that.
Awesome. Now, were you a big fan of animation growing up?
Yes. So I grew up in kind of a North Texas area here, and so I've been in the Metroplex for a while, and but when I was little, I really enjoyed watching cartoons, like especially Saturday morning cartoons, and I was really into He-Man and G.I. Joe and that stuff.
Yeah.
But my mind was totally blown. I was like 7 years old, and I saw this cartoon called Star Blazers, and it was done in a style I was not familiar with at all, and it just really, something about it really spoke to me. And then once I started really getting into it, and I realized that it was kind of unlike any cartoon I'd ever seen before, because it had adult situations happening in these characters' lives that was kind of like way more than my 7-year-old.
What we have in the American at that time, yeah.
The characters were dying, left and right. Whereas if you watch, a G.I. Joe cartoon, everybody's shooting lasers and no one's ever getting hit. And,
everybody jumps out of like the exploding vehicle right at the last second. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's very bloodless. So, and then that led to Robotech, which was the next thing that I saw. And it was kind of right around the same time that these shows were starting to make the rounds in America. And then I kind of just left that behind. I went into middle school and didn't really think about it much. But then once I started really getting into theater, that was around the same time that I was in high school. And then right after that, in college, I was a theater major. And I just totally fell back in love with anime through Cowboy Bebop and Dragon Ball Z and Toonami and Gundam Wing and all the great stuff that was out kind of in the, I guess it'd be like the late 90s, early aughts.
Yeah.
And I just fell back in love with anime really hard. And so yeah, pretty much from then on, I was like really excited about someday being able to do some voice acting and some anime. And it took me a while to get there, but I'm so glad I finally made it.
And we'll come back to Star Blazers here in just a second.
Sure.
But so did you know from an early age that you wanted to be an actor?
Yeah, so I did my first sort of production in kindergarten. I was a big problem in the classroom. So I was always
Welcome to the club, my friend.
Yeah, I was always trying to turn the focus of the classroom towards me, so that I could, get attention and make people laugh and do my antics and all that stuff. But my teacher recognized that this was probably something she could redirect. So my teacher, Mrs. Jones, kindergarten year, she cast me as Peter Rabbit in the play Peter Rabbit, and that was it. I was just hooked. It was amazing. I loved it. I couldn't get enough. And I did theater all through, elementary school, middle school, high school. Went to college to get a theater degree, and then switched that over to radio, television, film. Sort of after getting a taste of what a theater degree was, I decided that it wasn't quite right for me. So yeah. And then I kind of always knew that this was going to be a big part of my life in some way. I didn't really know, obviously exactly where it was gonna lead, but yeah, and it's been a lot of ups and downs to get here, but I'm so glad to be able to do the stuff that I get to do.
Awesome. Now, what was your first voice acting role?
Okay, so yeah, my very first voice acting. Let's see. It was probably unpaid, and it's hard to think. It was probably something I did either my senior year of high school or my freshman or sophomore year of college.
Okay.
For like a student project, something like that would have been my first sort of. And in fact, I remember we had a class project that we did, and one of the parts of it was creating a video, kind of like a video project, and I did a narration for part of it, and I think that was probably the first thing I did. Now, the first paid like professional sort of work that I did was for Funimation Studios, and that was in 2012. So it was kind of a big gap between my first role and then my first sort of professional paid role. And that was on a show called Level E, which was directed by Joel McDonald, and it was kind of this really funny, quirky show that was like a takeoff on Men in Black, the Men in Black movie. It was my first title role, my first time getting paid to voice an anime character was probably Walla, so I was never credited for that. But I think my first credit was on that show, and I played this guy named Yamada, and he was. At the time, I was like, wow, I'm really killing this. Like, I thought I was doing great, and then of course I listen back to it now, and it's like, ouch, that's I've grown a lot since then. Which is good. That's what you should be doing, right? You should be looking back on older stuff and feeling like you've improved. So, if anybody out there wants to go listen to me try really, really hard to sound like a guy in a show, like that's probably the one to listen to. Level E.
Yeah, I was trying to think because I remember back when the Funimation channel was a thing.
Yeah.
I remember watching that because it came on, and I was like, "Oh snap! It's Vic in here. He's gonna be the MC." So, I remember it. But yeah, so I remember the show, but now I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch to find out who Yamada is.
He was in one episode, so he was like, yeah, he wasn't. There's no reason why he would really stand out in your mind at all. But
well, now I have to go hunt for him.
But here, the coolest thing though was that there was basically it was like four students, and these were like high school students, and they were all kind of in this episode, and they were sort of the main characters of this episode, these four students. And the four students, if I remember correctly, were me, Rob McCollum, Dave Trosco, and I'm blanking on the fourth one. But basically, these other guys were like very seasoned with this stuff. So I was going in the booth and listening to the stuff that they had already done and just feeling really like, wow, this is cool that I'm getting to sort of like act off of the lines of Rob McCollum right now. That was really neat. And the good thing about Joel as a director was that he was very supportive. He also came from kind of a theater background, so he definitely understood the need to have some time to get used to acting in the booth versus sort of being up on a stage in front of people. It's very, very different. And I know that, in the beginning he was having to kind of rein me in quite a bit. And but yeah, just, what a cool show to be my first one, because I really sort of felt like it was, it's not like it was a sequel. It's not like it was, necessarily either like a gigantic, huge spotlight on it. So it was kind of like I felt like whatever I did, it was going to be okay. Whether it was like awesome or kind of something that somebody who's pretty new to it would do. And yeah, so that was Level E. Go check it out.
I'm trying to think. Were you guys the one that turned into like Power Rangers type people?
No.
Oh, that was I remember like there was a group of kids in that show that turned into.
Yes.
Darn.
Yeah, it was like a Super Sentai Squad or something like that. Yeah. And it was a really funny show. Like, I loved the sense of humor of the show. The episode that I was in was not funny at all. Like, there was only like two maybe moments of like humor in it, and the rest of it was just like this horror episode about there was some what it was. I remember now. Okay. There was
spoilers for Level E.
Yeah, right. Get ready, guys. If you don't want to find out what happened in a show from 2012, please stop listening now. Yeah, so there was these aliens, and they basically had come to Earth to escape their planet or whatever. But they had this thing where the way that they would mate was the males would devour the females, which that sounds crazy. And so, But what happened is like you end up sort of sympathizing with this alien kid who can't stop craving eating this girl in his class. And he just looks like a normal person, just like everybody else. But basically, these 4 students witness this alien kid like basically devouring this high school girl. And then they're like, what do we do? And then sort of the whole episode is like a story of them. I can't believe how much I remember of this, but it was kind of a big, it's stuck out in my mind because it was like my first, your first named role is a big deal. It stays with you for a long time. Because prior to that, I would tell people, oh yeah, I got to go, voice this cool thing at Funimation. And they'd be like, well, what is it? And I'm like, well, there's this one scene where like there's this guy, he's screaming in the background and he gets killed. That's me, It was always.
I was screaming guy number 3.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a letdown, but yeah, so that was cool. I really liked Level E, and I doubt that show will ever get a sequel. But if it does, maybe I'll get to do something with it again someday.
That would be cool. Yeah, since you mentioned Rob's in it, he's been on the show before. He's a super cool guy. So
yes.
now I've got another reason to listen to it. So we got Chris and Rob. So I'll be able to. I'll be like, I know those people.
Yeah, Rob is awesome. There's like a handful of people that, especially in the early days when I was kind of when I was cutting my teeth at Funimation, doing a whole lot of Walla and picking up a few little bit parts here and there. There was a few people that you'd see them in the lobby and they who they are, and they've got this amazing resume of stuff that they've done, but they're just like really laid back, just normal human beings. And he's definitely one of them. He's obviously spectacular actor, and but he's just like such a nice guy. So I remember that from very early on, being impressed with how humble that dude is.
Oh yeah, he's super cool. Okay, so kind of going back to what we talked about what you were talking about previously, how you really liked Star Blazers. What was it like when you got to do that audition? I assumed you just did a regular audition, or did you audition specifically for Kodai?
So yeah,
or is it one of those cool stories where like I wanted to be this guy, but then they were like, no, you're going to be the MC?
No, it was actually a little different than that, although kind of similar. So the director, Jerry Jewell, had cast me in a show prior to that called Chronos Ruler. Mm-hmm. And I was like, we were co-lead. So he had cast himself as kind of the lead, and I played his son, who was kind of the co-lead in the show. And it was the first time that I'd really worked extensively with Jerry. And throughout the run of that show, obviously being kind of a co-lead, you get to spend a lot of time in the booth, and you get to spend a lot of time developing some chemistry. And we did. We had this great chemistry. Like we were just, it never felt like, we were working. Usually it's great with all the directors up there, but you sort of can fall into a really cool pattern sometimes with certain directors and on certain shows or whatever. And we just had this, like, we were just having fun. And so anyway, at one point, I don't know how it even came up, but we were like halfway through the run of recording it, and we got to talking about some of like the cartoons we used to love as kids, and one of the shows that came up was Star Blazers, and I was talking to him at length about Star Blazers and how it had been very formative for me, in terms of introducing me to anime, and I was having a lot of fun like doing some of the voices of the characters in the old show, and so side note, I had no idea that Funimation was in talks to try to acquire this show. No idea. And at that time, Jerry had not been tapped to direct it either. But what ended up happening out of that was, we got very close to the end of recording Chronos Ruler, and he just very casually was like, I think there might be a space show that's going to be coming up next, and I might have something for you. I was like, oh, cool. That sounds good. I love, sci-fi. I'm a huge sci-fi fan. And I love anything with mecha, giant robots. That's my jam. Mm-hmm. So I was like, great. And then, I get a call and come in, and I see the word Yamato, and I'm like, what is this? And he's like, oh, well, this is the reboot of Star Blazers. And he was just so casual about it. So I tried to sort of mimic that, and I was just like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Inside, of course, I'm just like
screaming.
My 9-year-old self, is so excited, like can't believe this is happening. So then I get in the booth and I'm like, here I am expecting he's going to say, okay, you're, Ensign McCormick, or, it's not, that's the Americanized name or whatever. I figured it'd be some supporting role since I had just done kind of a lead role for him. And sometimes directors, they like to mix it up season to season and maybe not go with the same people over and over again.
Yeah.
Kind of as
yeah,
the
don't want the audience
dictates.
to kind of get burned out.
Right. Yeah. You want to try to mix it up, and it's good for the directors and the actors to kind of keep that chemistry fresh and stuff. But he was like, "All right, well, let's go ahead and start, kind of going through this." And I'm like, "Okay, who am I playing?" He's like, "Well, you're gonna be Kodai." And that was, I don't know. There are a few things in life, professionally that compare with that moment. Just because, I think the series meant so much to me, and then to get a chance to be involved at all is amazing. But then on top of that, to be the lead my mind was just blown. And at the same time, I had to quickly kind of recover so that I could now start I got to bring my craft to the fore and start really digging into this script, and we're gonna start, figure out where the voice is going to be placed, and all these let's do these logistics, right? Because if I really think about it too much, I'm probably just going to wet my pants and embarrass myself here. So yeah, I was just floored and so excited, and I'm so glad that Jerry and the studio have trusted me with this property, because it's just so beloved, in the hearts of so many people, mine included. And the show itself is freaking amazing.
Yeah,
it's the best.
I think I'm on episode 12.
Yeah.
Right now, because I saw the tweet where it's coming, the season's coming to an end.
Right.
It's got a couple episodes left.
Yeah, we've got, I think next week actually is episode 26. So that's kind of the dramatic conclusion of 2199, and then of course Funimation has announced that the sequel is going to be starting up this season as well. So
Sweet.
I'm going to get a chance to reprise Kodai in Yamato 2202, which is the sequel. And I think it's actually, I don't know how many episodes it is, but
112. Well, we're going to give you longevity.
Yeah, no, this is the coolest thing ever to be able to do this show. I mean, this and being able to perform as Aizawa in My Hero Academia, and then being able to do Miles Edgeworth in Ace Attorney. I mean, these are all just amazing things that have happened recently, just in the last year or so. So it's been a really good time.
Nice. So have you played any of the Ace Attorney stuff beforehand?
Yes,
or
in fact,
familiar with? Okay.
That was my first exposure to visual novels. So I had a Nintendo DS back in whatever it was, 2005, and I saw an ad for the game online, and I was like, a video game where you play an attorney and you go to court.
Yeah.
That sounds insane. I need to see what that is. So I bought it just based on that alone. I didn't know anybody who had it. I didn't know anything about it beyond it just looked like a game that I could never even imagine how that would work. How would you even play that game?
It would definitely be one of those ones where I would love to have been in the board meeting for that. We're going to pitch this game.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
You are an attorney and you like to go objection, but you only have 3 of them, so you can't do it all the time. Right.
The elevator pitch for that sounds crazy. But it was so much fun. I loved it, and I just really fell in love with it. So, and of course my favorite character was Miles Edgeworth, because he's a badass. He's just he's just a straight up badass. It's funny because he's a badass, but he's a badass who constantly loses, which is interesting. Because prior to him showing up, he has this amazing, undefeated record. He's just this untouchable prosecutorial star. And then as soon as you are introduced to him, he just starts getting his ass handed to him over and over and over again, and never really recovers till, I guess, much later when he finally joins up with Phoenix Wright down the road. But yeah, I was a huge fan of the game. And then I did a very sort of traditional audition for that role. Kyle put out a call to pretty much all of the actors around Funimation and some others in the area. And, I knew pretty much right from the start that I'd be going for that I'd be going for Miles, just simply because I thought my vocal range would be better suited to him, than Phoenix. I thought Phoenix was a little bit higher, and he'd probably be casting somebody who's a little bit higher pitched. So I was going to read for them both, but I figured my best shot was Miles, and so I put most of my preparation into that, and did a whole lot of recordings of myself. And kind of my typical strategy is, if I know that I'm going to be going out for a certain character and I know kind of what the vocal range is, then I'll spend some time at home, and I'll just get some hours in, like recording the character, listening back, tweaking things, trying things, experimenting, so that hopefully if I get to the point where I can get in front of somebody and do an audition, I've got something I feel pretty comfortable with. And that was the case with Kyle, and Kyle was another one who we had done a show prior to that called Izetta, the Last Witch, and that was another situation where I had kind of it was a supporting role. It was a character named Sieg, and he was very serious. There wasn't a lot of necessarily range with that character, but we sort of developed a little bit of a chemistry in the booth and had a lot of fun with it. And so we kind of got to know each other that way. And then I guess with the next show with Ace Attorney, he felt like, okay, I'm going to trust this guy with this role and take a chance. I think, that was kind of, I would call that like the first sort of big, popularly recognized role that I got, maybe. Prior to that, it had been, some decent roles, but not necessarily the kind of roles that, anybody who I talked to would necessarily know right off the top of their head. Yeah. But as soon as I said Miles Edgeworth, people were like, "Whoa, yeah, Miles Edgeworth!" Like that was very well understood by most of the people that I knew, and so that was cool. And the show's really funny. Like it was great to be in a comedy, because prior to that, I'd done a few comedies, but it was mostly like action shows, like shonen, and lots of getting killed and shooting people and running and jumping, and that stuff's really fun too. But it was so great to be in something that was just really lighthearted, and it was a good change for me at the time. I think that was 2017?
I think so. Yeah,
2016 or 2017.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's been a really cool couple of years here where I've gotten a chance to do a lot more stuff.
Sweet. Now, do you prefer doing video games over like actual like anime or animation in general, or do you have like a preference?
Yeah, I mean, to this point I haven't done all that much, in the video game world. I've done a little bit here and there. Like last year I did kind of what I would consider my first maybe big role in a video game, which was for a company called Big Fish Games, and they had a game that came out in 2017 called Chimeras. What is the rest of the title? Chimeras Blinding Love. That's what it is. And so I got to play kind of two main characters in that game, and it's like a hidden object video game. So it's funny because it's also the kind of game that like some of the people that I know, especially like some of the like moms of kids that my kids like go to school with. Mm-hmm. They love games like that where it's just like you're just passing some time on your iPad or whatever, playing a hidden object video game. So they're like, "Oh, that game!" Yeah, like they totally knew Chimeras and they totally knew what I was talking about, which was cool. But yeah, so that was kind of like last year. That was kind of like my big entry into, and I say big, I mean, I haven't done anything huge in the video game world yet. I'm still that moment still hasn't come for me yet, but I have faith that at some point it will. And, for now I turn in a lot of auditions and trying to kind of get better at that, because it is different. I think what I do, what we try to do with AniMay is be very cinematic and treat that as, like if you were in a big budget movie, we try to like pretend like that's what's happening for us in these these anime shows. Mm-hmm. And you've got sort of like, people are going to sit down and watch a 22-minute show. You can take time with really developing that character. You can take time with, finding choices in different moments. Video games, it's very much like they're mostly here for the game, and everything needs to pop. So it's a little bit of a different approach, And yeah, so I'm hoping that I can do more of that stuff because video games are really awesome. I'm a big fan of video games. Right now, I guess mostly what I've done is anime.
Okay, so here's going to be a fun question.
Yeah.
And well, we're going to do two of them. So you get to do like any video game. So this is going to be you get free reign to do whatever you want. What is a series or genre or something that you want to do? So this will be your dream video game casting.
Okay. My dream video game casting. Yeah, I'm a huge Nintendo fan. So I, grew up with the 8-bit Nintendo and then the Super Nintendo and on and on and on. So I'm a big fan of that. I would love to somehow find my way into either the Super Mario franchise or the Zelda franchise. I think either one would leave me thinking that I had surpassed my wildest dreams. That would just be incredible. So, and I don't know exactly how I would even get to that point, but just being able to do something like that would be amazing. And gosh, the other thing is like those games are so well made. So it's like any sort of like Nintendo franchise game, you just know you're never gonna have to look back on it and feel bad or embarrassed about it or feel like, oh, that could have been something special, because they just make such great games. And especially on the Switch, like it's a whole, I think there's, even a possibility that the Switch could go down as maybe like the greatest platform of all time. It's just delivering such amazing games, game after game after game. So, man, I'd love to work with Nintendo. That'd be so cool.
We'll make a call.
Thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate
No problem.
that.
They'll ignore it, but we'll at least make the call.
We can make the call and say we tried.
Exactly. Okay, so before we get on to the fun one where we ask you, so kind of be thinking about this, like you get to do whatever you want and like animated wise, it could be an anime, it could be a Disney, it could be whatever, that dream casting. Before we go into that, let's kind of go a little bit kind of further back. So you were a big fan of anime when you were younger, like especially like animation when you were younger.
Yes.
Then you kind of got back into it in that Toonami era. Do you have a favorite anime or cartoon or anything like that like still sticks with you to this day? Like
I once a year I try. This doesn't always happen, but once a year I try to watch all of Cowboy Bebop again.
Nice.
Steve Bloom's performance as Spike Spiegel was the moment that I thought to myself, this is what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And just the story of I didn't learn it till much later, but just the story of how he kind of came into the industry through that and was really just kind of like a normal guy, wasn't really even pursuing acting, and just kind of this opportunity popped up for him, and he was in the right place at the right time, but he was also just this incredible talent. And you can really, like, I've watched the show enough that I feel like I'm probably making this up, but I feel like I recognize the beats in the show where Steve Bloom is really coming into his own. And I don't know, it's so cool. I feel like that dub is just going to stand the test of time for the rest of my life. I mean, it's so freaking good. And then it's, the dub is amazing, but the show itself is just so good.
Yeah, it still looks good. I mean, it came out in 98 and it still looks phenomenal. It's
crazy. I mean, it's crazy when you look back on it. Like, and really that year, 1998 was an amazing year for shows. But anyway, that was the beginning for me. That was where I was like, this is like an amazing art form. This is like, this is like Hollywood movie quality right here. And I love science fiction. I'm a huge science fiction fan. So it scratched that itch for me at the same time that it was like this really gritty, dark noir, show. And I don't know, millions of people have said all the same things that I would say about Cowboy Bebop. It's just such a good show. But also Ghost in the Shell was big. I really liked Akira. I watched, in fact, one sort of funny story is I was hanging out with a bunch of my friends, and somebody had rented this video from Blockbuster Video called Akira, and they rented it because it had a picture of a cool motorcycle on it, and they thought it was going to be like some movie about like, you know, cool motorcycle dudes fighting each other in some cartoon or whatever. So that's why they had rented it, and I think
they were right for the first like 10 minutes, and then it
yeah.
kind of went away.
It wasn't so much about that anymore. But yeah, one of the things I remember from it is like there was maybe like 5 or 6 of us that were all over at somebody's house one night, and we were watching this thing. And by the end of it, I was the only one left. Everybody else had either it was too weird or it just wasn't what they expected. And everybody else was gone except for me. They all went out to play basketball or something, and I was still just sitting in the house by myself watching Akira because it was just blowing my mind. I mean, it was so cool, and so I don't know. That was always kind of me. Like I tended to gravitate towards more cerebral kind of stuff, and I was kind of just a big nerd in a lot of ways, and still am. So that stuff really appealed to me. I really liked. I mean, I still think the storyline of Ghost in the Shell is like some of the most amazingly futuristic stuff anybody's ever created. So many of the things from that show seem like they're entirely possible. You know, in the coming 40, 50 years still. So those were very formative experiences for me. You know, both as just a consumer of really awesome stuff, but also as a voice actor.
Awesome. So let's just go ahead and rip that Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
No, I didn't give you a lot of time to think about it.
That's okay.
But so yeah, this is the casting where you get to do whatever you want. It can be a remake of something. It can be something brand new. So whatever you want, what do you go for?
There's 2 things I really want to see, and one of them I don't even necessarily have to be in it. So I'll start with that one. I think the world needs a really good Zelda movie.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't know if it's ever going to happen.
Would you make it a live action or an animated?
Yes, I would. And I've conceived of it for a long time, trying to think about how you do that in a way that, you know, because it's a series that is so whimsical, that it's the appeal that it has is very childlike in that way. But that's not the kind of movie that I would want to see. And I know it's kind of an overdone trope at this point to sort of take a very whimsical, childlike show and make it gritty. So I wouldn't say make it gritty, but I would really like to see. I would really like to see a really well done Zelda movie, and I wouldn't even need to necessarily be involved in that. I would just love to go to a movie theater and watch that film. The thing that I'd really like to do is I would really like to be involved in a kind of a show that got the same treatment that gives the same treatment as Star Blazers or Space Battleship Yamato, and that's a really amazing high dollar modern remake of Robotech. I think would be amazing, and I think the time might be right too, because the folks who, you know, really grew up on that show and were like kind of on the fringe into anime back then are, you know, maybe at the point in their lives where they aren't so much interested in that kind of stuff anymore. But I do think there's a group of people that were kind of in my age group that maybe were a little too young, or sorry, reverse of that, maybe a little too, right. I guess what I'm trying to say, like right in the sweet spot for when those first came out, that whatever they produced wouldn't have to necessarily stay 100% faithful to the sort of the art style or those things. I think you could modernize it in a way that would appeal to a modern audience while still maintaining what made the series so amazing in the first place, which was the great battles, the really cool character designs, and all the machinery designs, the Veritech designs. But then also, like, Robotech is a really sad show, which I didn't really pick up on until I watched it, you know, years later when I was a little bit older. That was another one that suddenly showed up at Blockbuster, and I quickly, you know, rented all the videos and watched them one weekend. But yeah, it's a really sad show about war, and it doesn't reveal itself as that right away, but that's really what's going on in Robotech. And I would love to see a really awesome remake of Robotech, and I would love to be involved in that somehow.
Because I'm trying to think. It was like they only had the one series, and then they just did like movies after that, right?
Yeah, there was like and the way it was presented in the U.S. was like such a hodgepodge, which is true of pretty much all these shows. Back in the '80s, early '90s, they would take multiple different series and kind of stitch them all together and call them the same thing. They did the same thing with Voltron. They stitched together, two different shows into two different seasons. And so, yeah, I guess the original version is, very, very different from what a lot of my peers would have been exposed to at that time. But that said, I think you could produce something in either another series or even just like, a movie that would be really amazing, and introduce it to it. Like, there's so many people, that are younger than me, that just don't have any idea what it is. They've heard the name maybe, and then it's pretty inaccessible. If you go back and look at some of the animation, especially, that late 70s, early 80s animation, it just looks very dated. And part of it's just because the technology has changed so much, now. And we're talking about film that's like 40 years old or whatever. It just doesn't look very good. It's aged pretty badly in some ways. So, I mean, it has that sort of nostalgic feel for those that were around for it. But for a new audience, that's probably not going to play too well. So,
yeah, I know that it's on, like, if you've got Prime, I know it's one of the ones that's like streaming on Prime. So I watched maybe like 6 episodes, and then I couldn't anymore. Just because I was like, oh man, this needs to be, redone.
Yes, it's begging for it. I mean, it's begging for some kind of. I think there's a level of licensing hell that it's in. I don't know all the details on that, but as far as like North American releases, I know that there's been a lot of licensing issues in the past, and so maybe that kind of plagues it to this day. I really don't know, but seeing what was done with Star Blazers gives me hope that maybe somewhere down the line we could actually see something like that. And then as far as like crazy dreams again that I would just love to be involved in would be like a Pixar film. I think Pixar, still makes just really, really awesome movies. And I would love to be involved in a Pixar film someday. It's good to have dreams. You got to have dreams in life.
Oh, definitely. So, a lot of sci-fi in your background.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, sci-fi is my jam. I love sci-fi.
So what's your favorite sci-fi whatever?
I
myself, I'm a huge Trekkie.
Okay, yeah, I have no problem with Star Trek whatsoever. I grew up watching Star Trek: The Next Generation, so I'm a big fan of that. And I never really went back and watched the original series. It's kind of hard. Well, and I've seen some of it. I mean, it's kind of one of those, like, if it's late at night and there's reruns on, then I've seen it, a couple times or whatever. But like Star Trek: The Next Generation was amazing in terms of the writing and the execution, the acting. Captain Picard was like kind of how I feel like I took learning a British accent seriously when I was a kid. And I don't know, there was a lot of moments in that show that I really felt like, I guess here's what I would say about sci-fi. Like, really, really good sci-fi is not about the future. It's about right now. Yeah. But it's all kind of dressed up in, in fantastical future situations. But there was a lot of stuff in, I haven't gone back and watched the whole catalog again, but there was so much stuff in The Next Generation that I felt like was so relevant to what was going on at the time. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that. I'm a huge Star Wars fan as well. I'm not somebody who feels like you have to only limit your love to one or the other. Like, right? I love them both.
Yeah, I hate those people. I say that, but one of one of my good friends, Liam DeCosmo, who's on one of our sister podcasts, conveniently called, you may guess that it may be a Star Wars podcast. It's called Cloud City Cast. So yeah, he's a huge Star Wars fan. They lost a bet to us once, so we made them watch like a couple episodes of Star Trek, and they poo-pooed all over it. So that was a fun time.
Yeah, to me,
he's in that mindset of you can only like one. Like Star Trek people can be over there, and Star Wars people can be over here. And I'm like, I like both.
There's good things about both. They're two totally different takes on what the future could be. Yeah. It's like the difference between 1984 and Brave New World. Like, they're both really great novels that depict what the future could be, and there's no reason to prefer one over the other. And I don't know, I guess Star Wars for me is about like really memorable performances.
Oh,
And
yeah, definitely.
for me, Star Trek is about really memorable like world building and ideas. Star Trek for me is about like a really cool show about ideas, that I really dig because I'm all about ideas. But yeah, I guess I'm a big reader, and I always was. And that's sort of one of the things I tell people. Like I'll go to conventions and stuff, or I'll meet fans, and I'll get a question like, what should I do if I want to be a voice actor, if I want to perform? And my answer is read, because I think what you do as a reader is you're sort of building an imaginary world in your mind, and it's being guided by the author of the book or whatever you're reading, the comic book, whatever. But that helps you sort of build that internal imagination muscle, whatever it is. I don't know what it is, but I credit a lot of my love of acting to my love of reading. And so to that end, like I really was a fan of Isaac Asimov as a kid. I really liked Neuromancer by William Gibson is like one of my favorite books of all time. I was really into, cyberpunk and that whole sort of aesthetic back then. Gosh, there's lots of, really good sci-fi I still read to this day. And in fact, I just started rereading a graphic novel series that I really love called Saga. I don't know if you've read that or not, but if you haven't and you like sci-fi, you should definitely check it out because it's amazing.
For whatever reason, you said Saga, and I went Sandman, and I'm like, no, that's not it.
I do love
a little bit
Sandman.
different. Yeah.
Neil Gaiman is great, and I love Sandman. In fact, I was talking to the director of My Hero Academia, Colleen Klinkenbeard, just this last week, and we were talking. She's a big reader too, so we were talking about different stuff, and I told her about rereading back through Saga, and she's a big Neil Gaiman fan, but she has not dug into the Sandman series yet, and I was kind of like, you got to get on that. You don't want to sleep on that. You got to get on that.
See, I think where I differed, because like I'm a big reader too. I went more of the fantasy instead of the sci-fi. Like I would watch the sci-fi, but then I would read the fantasy.
I love fantasy too. What's your jam right now?
Right now I'm rereading the Rift War saga from Raymond E. Feist.
Nice.
So
okay.
I'm in that. I'm patiently waiting for Game of Thrones, which will never ever come out again. I read like all of Brent Weeks' stuff, Ari Salvatore. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm really big into C. Robert Cargill, who used to like lived in Austin, did a bunch of stuff for, I think may have been like Ain't It Cool for a while.
Yeah.
And then he moved over, and then he became a director. Like I think he did the screenplay for Insidious.
Okay.
And,
yeah. Okay. That rings a bell. Yeah, I know what you're talking
like
about.
That. And he's got 2 really good novels where he delves more into like mythology, like almost like demon and like monster mythology. Okay. I listened to a podcast with him, and he described it as he took a lot of stuff from Neil Gaiman and put it in this movie. Like Neil Gaiman is one of his like muses.
Awesome.
So like he's got a bunch
I can
of
tell I would like
demons
that.
and stuff. Oh yeah, it's super cool.
So I can tell you also like what my next sort of foray into fantasy is going to be, because it's been sold to me with the highest possible level of accolades, and that is the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson.
Oh yeah.
Which I've been basically told by people, whose opinions I respect, that it's maybe the best fantasy they've ever read, and that like even better than Tolkien, even better than, so I gotta try that out, because man, if it's that good, I'm really missing out.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I've started at work because I'm there pretty much all of my life now. Yeah. So I've been doing a lot of audiobooks, but it's weird because it's all audiobooks that I've already read. So I'm just listening to other people read them back to me. Like I don't think I have a single audiobook in my Audible stuff that I haven't read before. So I've just repurchased it. So I'm just getting it back again.
Yeah. That's good though, because you do get a different sort of feel from it. Like one of my favorite books is of all time is a book called The War of Art, and it's a story of this guy who's it's a true story, and it's a story of a guy who's a screenwriter in Hollywood, and then he's also the author of the book Bagger Vance.
Okay.
and then I guess he did
Legend.
the Legend of Bagger Vance, and he did the screenplay adaptation as well. So he's this he's this writer who's dealt with writing his whole life, and the whole book is just basically about like how to overcome resistance, but it's told through kind of his own journey. So anyway, I've read that book, and it's a short read, so I've read that book, I don't know, 3 or 4 times. Another one that I try to just pull out every year and read it if I can. But then I figured out that there's a really, really good audiobook version of it. So, and it's a different feel, when you're listening to it versus when you're reading it. I think because my attention is different, and so I'll pick things out of it that I wouldn't necessarily have picked out if I was reading through it. And so it's a nice way to kind of re-experience something in a different way. And you get more out of it, or you get different things out of it, I guess.
Have you thought about maybe going into like the audiobook type realm?
Yes, I have. It's also one of those things that I really want to dig into in the coming year. I've started taking steps towards creating an audiobook demo. That's really one of the first things that you need to have. So working on that. I just finished up my first commercial demo. So I'm also trying to get more involved with like kind of commercial voiceover work, and just kind of expand, and get out there and get more opportunities and keep growing as I can and keep learning. But yeah, I love audiobooks, man. I especially love the aspect of being able to multitask a little bit is nice.
Yeah.
Because life gets busy, but if you're driving in the car and just sitting there in traffic, it's so cool to just be able to put on an audiobook and enjoy that instead of, just sitting there bored or listening to the same album you've heard 100 times before.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm right there with you doing demos. I just finished my character demo, and so I finally got that back. So it's
congratulations.
Thank you, and I gotta give a huge shout out to Amber Lee Connors at Sound Cadence. She's fantastic. Absolutely
She's awesome.
Love her. She was probably the nicest person I could have gotten to sit there and walk me through all this.
Yeah, she is amazing. And she's, there's a handful of people that I've met in the last couple years that really stand out to me as people that just have their stuff together. Like she's one that kind of right away you just get the sense that like, wow, she has really got her scene figured out. Mm-hmm. Which is cool. It's good to be around people like that because it kind of kicks your own butt and like, oh wow, I really need to get more of my own stuff together here.
Yeah,
but
that was like one of the main reasons that I started this show was because like it got to the point where like there was personal stuff back in like after high school into college, mm-hmm. and so it just kind of blew up for me. But then I got to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm really not doing anything with my life, and I still want to be what I wanted to be when I was younger.
Yeah.
So that's when I started doing this podcast. I'm like, okay, I'm going to, get used to talking more, start honing these abilities a little bit more, and then kind of go up through there. So it's like, I'm going to talk to industry professionals. We're going to make some friends that way. We'll talk to people. We'll see how it goes. And then now, basically, almost a year and a half later, finally got up that courage to go in and do it. So
yeah, like
for me, that's something that I can't stress. Like, get the courage out there. Like just do it, because it's a Nike commercial. That's all life is. It's just one big Nike commercial. You just got to just do it.
Yeah.
Do you have any good advice for anybody, like aspiring actors, like someone who's trying to write a book, anything like that? Any good words of wisdom?
I mean, I can tell you what's worked for me. So, I am a dad. I have 3 kids. I have a wife. I have, a mortgage, and I have like all these other things in my life.
You said really good things there, and then you're like mortgage.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the thing that comes with the mortgage is nice when it's a thunderstorm outside. But yeah. So all that means is like there are. But okay, so let me back up. So those are the things I have in my life right now. 15 years ago or whatever, I didn't have those things in my life, and I still found a way to let 24 hours go by and get nothing done on a regular basis. And I had what I thought at the time were these amazing ironclad reasons why I couldn't do, whatever it was that I felt like I needed to get done that day, or whatever it was that I was really wanting to, be doing. So I think since that time to now, it's even more apparent to me all the time, because I have exponentially less time now than I had back then. But it's just so apparent to me that you're never going to have time. It's never going to be there. So it doesn't matter how much free time you have on paper, you're going to find ways to not have enough time. That excuse will always be there. So the only thing that I've been able to do that helps me kind of overcome that on any kind of regular basis is to just take little steps forward every single day. So every day I have some little goal to just move it forward like an inch. If I can go to bed at the end of the night and I've moved forward 1 inch, that's a successful day for me. I don't have any expectations beyond that in my life for voice acting or for my voice acting career. Now, there are lots of days where I move forward way more than an inch, but there are no days that go by that I do not move forward an inch. And so I've been, I guess, voice acting professionally now for 6 years. And, I've paid a lot of dues in that time. But I've also learned a whole lot along the way. There's probably faster ways to get where I've gotten. Mm-hmm. I don't know what they are, but there's probably there's probably faster ways. If you would have told me 3 or 4 years ago what those ways are, I probably would have been like, awesome, I'll do that, because this is really hard, and just trying to consistently improve every single day really sucks, because there's some days you just don't want to do that at all. But yeah, I mean, I took classes, I read books, I recorded myself constantly every single day. I recorded myself, even if it was just on my phone, and there again, if I've got a little bit of time in my car and I've got some idea for a character and I just want to play around with it, I did it every day. And that's a sucky answer, because it'd be great if there was a different answer, like you just go do this thing, and maybe that answer's out there. I just don't know what it is. All I can tell you is the only way I've been able to do this with any kind of consistency is just try to move forward 1 inch every single day.
That's really good advice. I'm gonna put that. That's the name of this episode will be.
I also think that there's something to be said for. I still talk to people, especially online, that are ever since I got the role of Eraserhead in My Hero Academia, mm-hmm. There have been people, and this never happened before this, but there have been people that will reach out to me and be like, where did you come from? I mean, you just got this role and you didn't, you weren't really anybody before this, and now suddenly you've got this role. But I don't look at it that way at all. I look at it like every day I was just the same person, but I was just moving forward an inch every day. And then one day I moved an inch forward, and that inch was being able to get cast as Eraserhead. Which, by the way, the story of that is pretty interesting from the perspective of setting expectations and trying to achieve them. There was a conversation that I had with another voice actor, and it was in 2016. And at that time, I really hadn't even met Colleen Klinkenbeard. We had talked before, but I'd never been in any shows for her really. So I mostly just felt like she didn't really know I existed, and I figured some way down the road I would get a chance for an audition or whatever. But I was having a conversation with someone, and I was like, God, I've got to figure out a way, to try to meet her and try to figure out a way to have a conversation with her, because I knew that she's a producer at Funimation. Mm-hmm. She's an amazing director. She's an amazing actor, and she was somebody that I wanted to kind of get to know who she was. And nothing ever really came of that, except for the fact that when I did finally get a chance to meet her, I had that conversation sort of at the forefront of my mind, and I was like, I had a conversation with this person, months ago. About how you and I have passed each other in the hallways 100 times, but I'd never really introduced myself to you. And it turned out that the person that I had been talking to originally had months later sort of mentioned me to Colleen in passing And then Colleen had talked to, I believe Cliff about me when it turned out that this opportunity was going to come open. And I had done some work with Cliff before. And Cliff was like, yeah, Chris might be a really good, fit for that. And so, that reinforces for me, like, there was no path to getting where I got with that. It was just kind of, you can look at it from the perspective of like luck or just chance or happenstance. But I also kind of feel like, if you have a goal or if you have a thing you want to achieve, like talk about it with people. Maybe that could be the inch that you step forward that day. Don't just limit it to, these things that you're going to do to improve your craft, because so much of, like, kind of what you said previously, like so much of what you're going to achieve in collaboration with others. It's not going to be done on your own. So you're going to have to figure out ways to get to know people and meet people who are doing the things that you want to do. And, I think it's awesome what you're doing with this podcast, because that's absolutely a very, like, authentic and genuine way to do that. Like, the wrong way to do it is to try to take shortcuts, right? You don't want to go to a convention and corner your favorite voice actor and, jokingly tell them that you're not going to let them leave till, they give you the secret for how to be a voice actor. Right? I mean, there are no shortcuts. You just have to, and there's not necessarily going to be like a moment either. Like, even when I did the audition for Eraserhead, I totally did not think I got it at all. I mean, she was doing a voice match for Alex Organ, and so I was not the only actor that she had brought in, but I was somewhere in that pile of people that had already read, and I didn't think I got it, and so but I was able to walk away from that and kind of just be like, okay, well, if I get it, great, but if I don't, it's not the end of the world. I still feel like I'm, taking steps forward. Just even the fact that I was able to come in and do this audition when not that long ago we didn't even know each other. Like, I didn't even know Colleen at all. So, I think, and then obviously getting the role was like incredible. I love voicing Eraserhead. In some ways, I feel like he is like my truest self, in the sense that all he really wants to do is just kind of like roll up in a sleeping bag and sleep.
Yeah.
And those
are always the best characters too. Like Shikamaru and Naruto's like, no, I'm just too lazy. I can't do this, man.
Yeah.
Those are the best characters.
And he's a total badass, but he just can't be bothered. And I love that. It's so fun to play that character. The first, so I started in season 2, and after Alex departed for various reasons, but yeah, so taking over that role in season 2 was like, I was so excited about being that character that every time I got in the booth, Colleen would really have to reel me back in. Like, okay, remember, he's really cool. Like, this, nothing about what's happening here is affecting him at all. So she really had to beat that into me for like the first, I don't know, 3 or 4 episodes, because as soon as Eraserhead would be in some kind of scene where I would get to, quote unquote, take him out for a test drive and really kind of stretch in the role a little bit, she'd be like, okay, that's good, but you got to calm that down. Because remember, none of this matters to him. He just wants to be asleep right now. He doesn't give a damn about, what's really going on here. So that was a bit of an adjustment, but mostly due in part to the fact that I was just on cloud 9, like every time I got to get in the booth and do that character. It's such a great show. I really am hopeful that, season 3 is going to deliver on everybody's expectations. I think so far so good.
Yeah.
And hopefully it just keeps on being a really great show.
I completely agree with you. Chris, this was super fun. We're going to have you on again and we can talk more in length about stuff.
Yeah, I would love to. It's really, I like the fact that we got to have kind of a far-ranging discussion. I think when I've done some of these talks in the past, it's like just about anime. So it was fun to talk about, books and writing and all kinds of stuff with you, Josh. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Now, that being said, we're doing Cowboy Bebop for episode 100. You want to be on for that?
Oh, my gosh.
Because we started the podcast with the movie. That was episode 1. So I was thinking, I was getting with like some of my old co-hosts and everything, since this is episode 100.
Yeah.
And it happens, it'll be the last Monday in May, because in May we're doing our whole AniMay series where we're doing interviews and just anime films and all kinds of stuff. So
like it.
I thought it works out perfectly that episode 100 is an anime.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, why don't for episode 100, why don't we just do Cowboy Bebop the series?
That's brilliant. Please have me back. I would love to. The problem is you probably have to shut me up because I'll talk the entire hour. So
Hey, we're going to probably have Liam from Cloud City on, and those are our longest episodes that we ever do, or whenever we do anything with them, so don't worry about it. I think our longest one was like 2 hours, so, I mean, we can do a 3-hour podcast. No one cares.
Let's do it, man.
We'll just go on it.
Yeah, I love talking about Cowboy Bebop. That show's amazing.
All right, we'll make that happen. So, Chris, real quick, where can everybody find you on the social medias?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Chris Wehkamp, and just tonight there was the cast announcement for Steins Gate Zero.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Congrats on that, by the way.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's another just mind blowing show to get to be a part of because God, it's such a good show. But yeah, so I'm on there. And that's probably the best place to find me. I'm trying to convince myself to do something with Instagram, but I haven't been able to make that happen yet. But we'll see. For now, it's Twitter.
I say definitely pop on Instagram just because I think it's a little bit easier to interact with the community on Instagram.
Oh, really?
Like,
okay.
Yeah, like it's a little bit harder on Twitter just because there's so much stuff on Twitter. But
True.
Instagram, it's a little bit easier, like in my opinion.
I need to investigate it a little bit more. A lot of my peers and friends and stuff have, over the last month or so, started migrating hardcore to Instagram. So I'm like, I'm feeling the peer pressure. I got to figure it out.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Josh L. Kane. You can find the podcast on Instagram at Animation Station Podcast, on Twitter at Animate Podcast, on Facebook and Tumblr at Animation Station Podcast. You can also find all of our episodes on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, and on our website, animationstationpodcast.com. Oh, one more thing, Chris. I forgot to say this. Do you have anything upcoming that you want to plug? Completely whiffed on that earlier.
No, that's cool, man. Episode 1 of Steins Gate Zero drops on Monday. So if you guys are...
coming out?
It's coming on Monday. So if you guys are already subscribed to Funimation Now, the dub, episode 1 of the dub comes out on Monday. I cannot wait. When I recorded my part for episode 1, the rest of the cast, some of the rest of the cast had not recorded their parts yet. So I'm so excited to hear the return of all these great, especially Tatum in the lead role. Yeah. He's just, I feel like this is the part like he was born for.
Yeah, it's his part.
My God, every time I hear it, it's so good. So that's Monday, April 30th, guys. Check it out.
And then you've got the Bed and Breakfast for the Spirits, right? Doesn't that...
That's every Thursday. Okay. Yeah, episode 2 came out on Thursday. Episode 3 comes out this coming Thursday. And this is kind of my first romantic lead, at least in an anime. So I'm really having fun with that. Me and Emily Neves. It's being co-directed by Tia Ballard and Jade. And so this is really fun. I'm getting a chance to kind of stretch a little bit into a romantic lead, and it's really fun. So check that out too.
Jade's directing it?
Yeah, Jade's directing
Another friend of the show, Jade Sexton.
Awesome.
So
right. So check that out too.
All right, Chris. Yeah, this is super fun. Yeah, I'll get in touch with the for the Cowboy Bebop episode. We'll make that happen.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much, Josh. I appreciate coming on.
No problem. So for the Animation Station podcast, I'm Josh.
And I'm Chris.
Bye, everybody.